Okay, hopefully I can record this video and YouTube won't actually crash on me. I might end up having to make an edited version and then upload it, although that takes an hour and a half. Anyway, as you can tell from below, despite the lack of Star Wars music, I'm going to be reviewing Star Wars Edge of the Empire from Fantasy Flight Games. It's a new RPG that pretty much a lot of people that liked Star Wars Saga Edition, the G20 based system, that have tried this out are basically just shifting over completely to a new thing. The Order 66 podcast, which was devoted solely to Star Wars pencil and paper RPGs, dedicated to Saga Edition for a while, switched over already to covering Edge of the Empire and doing Edge of the Empire games on the podcast. And they're behind it 100%, despite the fact that they've been playing and using Saga Edition for a long time. And despite the fact that there's not actually Force users in this version of the game, technically, there are people that are Force sensitive that don't have Jedi or Sith training, and can use some much weaker powers that are intrinsically not very Jedi-ish, unless you promote them a lot. They are going to release Jedi Force users and such in a future book, which I both simultaneously like and dislike. They're kind of taking a Warhammer 40k RPG approach to it, where you have like the Rogue Trader book, which covers the crew of a trade ship that can be going out and doing a adventure or pirating or stuff like that, and then you have like the Space Marine game, and then you have like the Imperial Guard game, which is like an army game, and then you have like the Dark Heresy game, which you're like a party of Inquisitors kind of thing. Well, acolytes of an Inquisitor, but that's Warhammer 40k lore that I won't go into. They're taking kind of an approach to it with the new Star Wars game, where we're starting out with Edge of the Empire, which is basically people that live on the fringe of the Empire, taking place right after the first movie, when they've destroyed the first Death Star. It takes place right after that movie, where you can play smugglers, bounty hunters, hired mercenaries, colonists, either doctors and other things like that. I mentioned smugglers already, and mechanics. Basically anything aside from a Jedi you'd expect to have in a Star Wars game or just a science fiction game in general, you can be. And you can be a Force sensitive, but it counts as multiclassing, and powers generally aren't as impressive as you'd expect from a Jedi unless you promote them. And even then, it's a little tricky to use them because you're not trained in using Force powers. Next up, the second book that isn't even in beta yet will be focused on rebellion forces. So you'll be like rebel fighters directly opposing the Empire rather than like people living on the fringe of the Empire, making a life doing criminal stuff. And then the third one will be the book for Force users. And I guess these will each be around $30, maybe $40. So, cash grab? Probably, yeah. But if each one can offer an equally deep experience and options as this book is, hey, I'm perfectly willing to spend $30, because you get like 8 classes, each of which can be tweaked slightly to be a specific thing. Like, well, generally they'll be doing the same things and have a lot of key similarities. A technician can be like a inventor that specializes in making illegal technology and modding weapons and such, or a mechanic which specializes a little bit more in repairing things and I forget the third one. Colonists can be like political smooth talkers, doctors, things like that. Explorers can be traders. Bounty hunters can be like gadget guys, weapons experts, etc. Hired guns can be brutish, damage-dealing thugs or bodyguards, yada yada. Each one has like 3 sub-specializations. Smugglers can be like expert pilots, swashbuckly dudes, gunslingers, kind of things like that. little bitty subspecializations, and then you've got talent trees, and with 4 options each level of the talent tree, sort of like in a lot of MMOs, where you can purchase little talents which will customize your options. For instance, I built a a droid technician to get a grasp on the rules, and I went ahead and got a second in-class specialization. So while his primary is outlaw tech, he's also a mechanic. And I purchased the talents to make it where he can search really quickly and lessen any drawbacks, like it's dark. So put a drawback dice in the pool, and I can remove one of those. So it doesn't matter if it's dark because I have this ability. But if it's dark and my hands are tied behind my back, I'm going to have a hard time, searching. But not as much as if anyone else would, because I'm good at salvaging stuff, and I do it in half the time anyone else would do it. So I do it easier and faster. That's a very beefy talent available right from the get-go, and it makes your character really good at a specific thing. And plus, I also purchased talents that enable where I can put additional hard points to a thing I'm modifying. I can basically grab your gun, or go to the ship, or get your armor and go to a tool bench, and with the proper materials and time, I can make it where you can attach 2 additional mods to it. And attaching mods to things costs half price when you get the first rank of the talent. So my technician can not only salvage things easier, he can take your equipment, and while he's tuning it, make it where you can put 2 additional mods on it, and make it where you get 2 for the price of 1, effectively. So you want this scope and this barrel enhancement? Oh, each of those would cost 4,000. And you've already filled up all your regular hardpoint slots, so you can't do that. I'm sorry. Oh wait, you can. I put an additional 2 hardpoints on it, so you have more slots to put on it. There, you have room to put it on there now. Oh, and you only have 4,000 despite each being 4,000? Well, mods I install are half price, so you can put both in. That's freaking useful. Especially for modifying ships. Not only can you give weapons and armor extra customization slots with that talent, it also applies to ships, as far as I understand. And you can put more ship mods on because you pay half price for every ship mod when you install it. That's boss. That's boss. So yeah, if you got yourself a freaking skilled, heavily talented outlaw tech, your ship's gonna be pretty pimpin'. After you get the money necessary to clip it on there. Somebody with equal money that doesn't have an outlaw tech, skilled technician on there, will, with the same amount of money and resources, an identical ship will have a much inferior ship. Well, because they don't have as many mods, their mods cost twice as much. So that is pretty nice. That's got some good abilities, and each one has their own little special things they can do like that. It's very good. It makes you feel like you're special. You're doing your job, and you're really super cool. While, the technician, he might not be the best combat specialist in the world. He has to freaking, to use a blaster rifle, he's got to, buy an out-of-class skill, which costs more. The only combat skill he gets by default is punching people, which is really ineffective. But, well, he's not going to be as effective in a fight unless he specializes in it, is willing to spend extra experience points to get better at outside of combat. He's really paying his dividends simply from the fact that that guy over there that's the combat specialist has a really kick-ass weapon because of him. Especially considering the fact that if you roll really good on a mechanics check made on an equipment, it can add boost dice, another type of dice, which makes it easier to hit or trigger special effects when you attack. So while the mechanic isn't as good in a combat, after a period of time where he's tweaked the hell out of everyone's gear, he's pretty much adding an entirely new member of the party just in freaking boosts. Very supportive thing. And then there's the medic thing, where if you're, I think it's colonist, I'm pretty sure it's colonist, specializing in doctor, he's going to be healing a heck of a lot better. You know, doing just crazy nice stuff to you. You've got yourself a healer, man. You're going to survive a lot longer. He's going to pop over there, spring you on life, you know. Oh, God, my limb is gone. Oh, no, it's not anymore, because the medic treated me on the ship. Put me in the regenerative back-to-tank thing. And, you know, boosts the long-term care, you know. So everybody's got those little things that make them feel really special. So class design and customization is really, really tight and custom, nice, tasty, delicious. Delicious. Makes it feel very like you are a character. Makes you feel really nice. It's not... While, you know, you'll run into mechanics that have generally the same talents, and when you're buying that stuff off of a talent tree and it gives you these little tricks that you can do, it makes you feel a little bit unique. More so than some other systems where you've basically... you get talents that every ranger's got, you know, kind of thing. You know, it's more like, I bought this, and I bought this, and I'm one of those people that spent them here, you know, kind of thing. You're constructing your class, rather than just slapping down features from a class that's already there. And you even pick and choose your skills that you have from an established list, which D&D does as well, but the fact that you are pretty much building every element of your class, and you can effectively buy class abilities, class skills from other things as well, without as much of a drawback to it as in other systems, means you can be your own character even more. Like the mechanic that uses blaster rifles, when he doesn't actually... Mechanics don't normally use those, because they don't have the skill for them in the career, kind of thing. Or, you know, etc. like that. And you can add more class skills by multi-classing, which is pricey, but a little bit more fluid than other things. And like in D&D 4th edition, you pretty much have to completely lose your original class for a level. You know, basically, I'm not getting anything from Barbarian this level because I took a level in Cleric. You know, in 4th edition, it's basically where you've got options of getting a little bitty dabbling nibble through multi-class feats, but you don't have to sacrifice your primary class. In this, you're basically buying a specialization out of another class. You're buying one of their talent trees and adding like 4 skills you normally might not have access to, although some have an easier time of getting extra skills from extra specializations than others. Like, for instance, Outlaw Tech, or like the Technician's specializations tend to have a lot of things in their specializations that a lot of other things have, while this doesn't cover their like key element things like mechanics and stuff like that. It covers things like Brawl or Pilot and stuff like that. Things that they don't have as much of a strong element in that category. Well, they can benefit from it. It's just, it's a little harder for them to get extra skillage unless they select particular things. Anyway, sorry for the booping. If you are hearing that booping from the Skype going off, I'm going to try and silence that. But as I speak, I should have turned that off originally, but I shouldn't even brought attention to it. Amateur mistake. But anyway, yeah, character customization gets 2 thumbs up from me. While it might be a little much for a complete noob, because you go buy a spend experience to buy options kind of thing. It's not something that'll be like, oh my god, what do I do? You know, basically you picked your race, which gives you your starting experience, and then you pick your class, and you can buy options. You get like a certain amount of skills for free, and then you pick your specialization, get a certain amount of skills for free. Then you can buy extra ranks, buy extra talents, buy extra skill, I mean not skill, but ability scores. You know, purchasing options using experience points isn't all that crazy hard to do if you're not familiar with tabletop RPGs, especially considering a lot of video games do that. You know, so yeah, character creation and accessibility, delicious, tasty. 2 thumbs up and 2 fingers up apparently. So yeah. Now back to the dice mechanic, because I kind of just rolled past that and didn't cover it as much as I should have when I first brought it up. Should have done that already. But the dice system is fluid and stuff. You've got special dice, but they're relatively easy to know, to learn, because it's in a very intuitive system. You've got certain kinds of dice that do certain kinds of things. And I probably should have scrolled. There it is. Okay. You've got several kinds of dice. First, there's the positive dice, which is ability dice, proficiency dice, and boost dice. And then each of them has a negative counterpart. Difficulty dice, challenge dice, and setback dice. And then, of course, there's the force die, which you'll only ever use if you have force powers, and percentile dice, which you'll pretty much almost never use, but it's there in some circumstances. Now, there's a series of symbols on these things that are relatively easy to understand. There's the success symbol, which is a little explosion effect. It's like bing, pow, whap kind of thing. Spiky explosions, special effect thingamajiggy. And basically those are successes. You have to have at least one success to have succeeded, on the check. But those are cancelled out by the failure symbol, which is like an upside down indented triangle thingy. Black triangle. And though failures cancel out successes, but generally don't have any other effect to them, as far as I'm understanding. And success and failure symbols appear on their corresponding dice. They appear on pretty much all of the dice that you'll be rolling. Correspondingly, the failure dice don't appear on the good dice. Don't get me wrong. And good dice, good symbols don't appear on bad dice. The successes are on the positive versions, and the failures are on the negative versions. Anyway, another beneficial result is advantage. It's kind of a rebel symbol with like the wings going up to here, and then there's a dot. Kind of looks like it's heroic looking, so you can identify it relatively easily. It basically adds an additional positive consequence. You can spend advantage for bonus effects. Sometimes it's clearly explained in your skill. Sometimes it requires more advantage to spend towards this thing. But generally, an advantage means something good happened as the result of the check. Even if you did not succeed, something good happened. Like, well, if you shoulder rammed the door trying to open it and failed, but you rolled an advantage, it jostles a little bit, and you get the feeling that you'll get in it. It'll be easier to do it if you try again, kind of thing. However, there's a counterpart to that. That is called threat. It looks like a little... it basically looks like the window to a TIE fighter. It's kind of like got little segmented things with a hexagonal symbol in the thing. It looks kind of a little bit menacing, so once you identify it and you learn what it means, it's easy to associate these images with what they mean. Threat cancels out advantage, and vice versa. If you have extra threat left over, it usually means something bad happened, corresponding to how many threat are there. So, like in the above example, you shoulder rammed the door, and instead of a advantage, you rolled a threat, and you shoulder around, just, ow, my shoulder, I tweaked it a little, owie, I'm going to suffer a penalty to checks using that arm, ow, kind of thing. And, there's the triumph symbol, and its counterpart, the despair symbol. Triumph means you have an incredibly powerful result, like it's a critical success. You did something really nice and dynamic. Like on an attack roll, you do a grievous injury to your opponent, or you do a really powered up effect that you would have gotten from advantage. Some things have things that you require triumph to do, and you can spend triumph towards really powerful effects, kind of thing. Unlike the previous things, triumph is not cancelled out by despair, and despair is not cancelled out by triumph. Both will happen regardless. So if you roll a despair into triumph, something really good will happen, but the enemy will have some sort of advantage. Like in the... and triumphs generate a success, and despairs generate a failure. And that aspect, the success or the failure, can be cancelled out. So let's say in the above situation you rolled a triumph when you did that door, but you did not actually somehow succeed. You did not succeed in opening the door, but you got a triumph. That means you rattled the hell out of the door. Basically, the next check will be easy as pie. Just basically put your foot to it. It's gone because you triumphed. Now, let's say you got a despair. The door doesn't budge at all. And let's say you didn't have a failure die. You shoulder rammed that door trying to get by, and let's say the things you were running from and you were trying to get through that door, they catch up. Oh no. If you rolled multiple despair, they could have gotten up to you to catch up and been able to take a shot at you, kind of thing. So yeah. Now, since both triumph and despair could happen, you could probably have reduced the door to shambles and just need to put a foot through it to get through, and the enemy caught up to you. So, on your next turn, you could put your foot through the door and move to cover, but the enemies might have a chance to take a shot at you. Kind of thing. You see what I'm talking about? It seems like a little complex, but you can probably approximate that this would be reasonably easy to pick up if you were at the table. And the different dice, what you use, how you structure a pool, is very intuitive and easy to understand. Essentially, you start off with the base ability dice when you're making a core check. This is based on your attribute or your training in something. If you're trained in it, you can upgrade a certain number of them to proficiency dice because you're proficient in that skill. Let's say you're trying to use brawl. You want to punch a guy. You use your brawn statistic and your brawl skill. Let's say you're not trained in brawl. That means you can't upgrade any of your ability dice, so you just use your brawn score. Let's say that's 2. You use 2 ability dice to structure your positive dice. And now let's say you have 2 ranks in brawl. Because you have 2 ranks in brawl and 2 ranks in and 2 brawn, you can upgrade both of your dice to proficiency dice, which is the only dice that the triumph symbol appears on. So you can only critical succeed in a skill you're trained in. The size of the pool is set by the higher of the 2 numbers, either your attribute or your skill. So if you have 3 ranks in brawl, you would instead use 3 ability die, and let's say you still have the 2 in brawn. You'd only upgrade 2 of those because the upgrade, how many you upgrade, is decided by the lower number. So let's say skill 3 and ability score 2. You get 2 proficiency dice and 1 ability die. That's upgraded. See? It's relatively simple, easy to pick up, especially if you've got the dice in front of you. Now, what about boost die? And what is difficulty dice? How do you set the difficulty of this roll? Because successes are something that's on a face, it's a symbol, kind of thing. And if we're only rolling things with either blank faces or successful effects, what's setting the difficulty of this? That's what difficulty dice are for. Each skill check has a set difficulty. Something relatively easy will only have 1 difficulty dice. Something harder will have something hard to do will have 3. But generally you'll be able to only add 1 or 2 difficulty dice to the pool. And that adds the chances of rolling negative symbols, like failures and stuff like that. Now, the negative equivalent of proficiency dice only comes up when the opponent is really dangerous, or there's an increased measure of difficulty to it that the setback dice doesn't cover. And that upgrades it, and it's the only one with the despair symbol on it. So, this seems a little complex, but it's something that if you had them on hand, you could learn it really easily, I hope you see. Now, boost dice and their counterpart, the setback die, work reasonably simply. Like, if somebody tries to assist you, you add a boost die, because that's a positive consequence. If the situation is in your favor, you get a boost die. Sort of like a circumstance modifier from the D20 system. And if something is going against you, like it's dark, or you're suffering a grievous injury, there's a setback die in there, and counterpart to the boost die that can add negative effects to you and make it harder for you to do the check. And boost die make it easier for you to do the check correspondingly. And considering you know exactly why each individual dice, like boost die and setback die, are being added to the pool, it adds a more hard-coded system of understanding what's causing you to fail. Like, as opposed to the circumstance bonuses or penalties in the D20 system, where it's like, you only know that caused you to fail if the DM just randomly, assigns it to the case, or you missed exactly by that much. Like, oh, suffer -2 because you can't see very well. Oh, I missed by 2. It must have been because it was dark. If it wasn't dark, I'd have succeeded. That's the only hard-coded into the system you can tell that circumstance caused you to fail. With this, you know why that boost dice is in there is because the mechanic fine-tuned your equipment and it fires really smooth. If that gave you the success necessary to push you over the top, you feel that weapon being really responsive and the sights are really sharp. You know exactly where that came from. If you missed because of a failure put on that setback, from that setback dice given to you because it's dark, you missed because you couldn't see very well. It's hard-coded into the thing. You know exactly where the setback dice come from. You know exactly what causes you to fail or succeed. Kind of thing. It's really nice. And it adds a little extra ease in smoothing out the narrative and getting it in there, All in all, it's a very good system. It's very smooth. I covered a large majority of the mechanics, but on a final note, this is not like the D20 system, in which it's basically it's a kind of an adversarial relationship where you're trying to beat the DM's encounters and his dungeon that he's put together and such. While not all D&D games are run like that, it's somewhat of an adversarial arrangement. It's set up to be kind of an adversarial thing. The general mentality of this kind of game, similar to World of Darkness, is you are all at the table, you're all here to tell a story and have fun. That's the emphasis, just in the system. Narrative dice, rewarding creative thinking. It promotes storytelling as a group, as opposed to everybody go against the DM who's guiding the story. Everybody has kind of an equal push into the story. For instance, the player decides what happens with advantage, and to the extent of what the DM will allow. Like, oh, I rolled a triumph. Oh, maybe I knocked the guy off the catwalk with this triumph. And the DM's like, sure, yeah, that happens. And, you actually controlled the story's flow because you decided to do that with your triumph. You have a lit measure of control over the narrative because everybody is there to tell the story. And a measure of trust is important, of course. Because, if you've got a DM that'll just jank you and, is an adversarial kind of DM, the system doesn't work, actually, as well, or nearly as much. It'll start throwing wrenches into the works of dynamics. Like, you'll start hoarding force points, which will cause an imbalance in how the freaking, not force points, but destiny points, and that'll tweak up the thing and make it not work all that well, and the DM will have a hard time getting that dynamic of the game to work smoothly, and it'll take a lot of fun out of the game. So this is not a game for an adversarial DM. It's set up for everyone's got a chance to sit down and tell a story together. That is how this game is run, and I like that. And the narrative dice, once you get used to not being like a straight dice roll system, and have the narratively themed dice, you get used to that, which is very intuitive, nice, sharp, crisp. Mwah. Once you get used to that, it's very nice, tight, fluid, delicious system. I'm going to be doing running some games of this in the near future if I can get a group together. If you're interested, let me know via a message of some kind, either a comment below or message me via the my channel kind of thing, private message, something. I'm looking for another member of the team to go over have a Skype game. So yeah. And I will probably post those to my channel because I can record my Skype calls. So yeah, look forward to that if I ever manage to get a group together for this. I've played it a bit in online games, but I haven't actually managed to run one before, or get my friends a big enough group to actually run a game myself with it. So anyway, this is Cheese of Ages signing off, or taking off. I should have come up with some Star Wars themed sign out thing, but this is Cheese of Ages signing off.